So great to have you all here today. Alex, take it away with our preliminaries, please, and that'll allow us to get started.
Of course. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our presentation today. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording link will be emailed out to all attendees. This webinar is provided as an educational service by Alcorn Immigration Law. The information discussed is an overview only and should not be construed as legal advice or advice to take any specific action on. Please be sure to consult a knowledgeable professional with assistance with your particular issue. And lastly, please submit any questions you may have using the Q&A function through Zoom at the very bottom. I'll give more instructions as we continue. The questions will be shared publicly, so please do not share any sensitive or personal information. And there is an option to submit your questions anonymously, and we will try to get to as many as time permits. And now it is my pleasure to introduce you to our CEO and founder, Sophie Alcorn, and our Chief Legal Officer of Excellence, Linda Haggerty.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alex. And I am so excited to welcome everybody to get ready for H-1B season. How are you today, Linda?
I'm doing well, Sophie. How are you?
Good. It's so great to see so many new names in our participants panel. So welcome. If this is your first time that you're interacting with Alcorn Immigration Law, we welcome you. And if it's your second or more, welcome back. Thank you for being here today. We appreciate all of you and this opportunity to share about how the H-1B lottery works and what to expect in the year ahead. So to get us started, just a little bit about what we stand for here at Alcorn Immigration Law. Our mission is to overcome borders, expand opportunity, and connect the world. And we do that by practicing compassionate, visionary, and rigorous immigration law to support you, people in the tech sector, in entrepreneurship, in the STEM fields, in business, because we know that what you do creates more abundance and amazing technologies for the planet that really serves the betterment of humanity. So when you work with us, our mission is to accomplish your goals together. I'm Sophie Alcorn. I'm the founder of Alcorn Immigration Law. I'm a California board certified specialist in immigration and nationality law. My dad was an immigration lawyer. I've been doing this for since I was a wee lass, back in my childhood, well before I became a lawyer. And you can catch my column in TechCrunch every week. It's called Dear Sophie. It runs on Wednesdays. And that's where I ask readers, or where I answer readers' immigration questions. And you're always welcome to submit a question there. But you have access to me and the amazing Linda Haggerty today. So any questions, please put them in the Q&A. You can make them anonymous. You can add your name if you'd like. But we're going to try to answer as many as possible, either throughout as we can or at the end. And I'm so delighted to be joined today by Linda Haggerty. She is an incredible immigration attorney with over 2 decades of experience, really focusing on business immigration in a boutique practice setting. And what that means to us is, our clients aren't cookie cutter. It's not a volume-based factory. We help a lot of early stage and rapidly scaling startups, and they have quirks. They're figuring out their operations. They're figuring out their funding. And we put on our thinking hats every single day to figure out solutions to well, the funding hasn't come yet. How do we prove ability to pay? Or, this is the first time this job has been offered at our company, or this is our first employee. But with Linda's expertise and amazing, bedside manner for our clients, where she leads our attorney and paralegal team. And I'm just so thrilled to have such an amazing, compassionate expert with me at Alcorn. Our clients are in amazing hands. So welcome, Linda.
Oh, thank you so much, Sophie. It's my pleasure to be here, and I really do love everything about Alcorn. I mean, it's been such a pleasure working with you and being part of your podcast, and it's a really been a great opportunity for me. So I'm excited to be here as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And it's just the beginning of really the people were able to help the brilliant, inventions and technologies and business plans that we can help unblock with, solving US immigration. It's really such an incredible opportunity to participate. So if you're interested in becoming our client, we certainly will have more information for you throughout the webinar and also at the end. But one of the things that we love to do is, make our network available to support our clients. And that can be useful for fundraising, for business development and partnerships, for market access. We're connected to a lot of professionals in various sectors, and we really aim to provide that, boutique, all-encompassing experience and support you to be successful in whatever ways we can. So let's do it. Let's talk about the H-1B. And we know there's a lot of people on the webinar today, and some of you might be startup founders. Maybe you're hiring your first employee. Some of you might be running people ops or HR at a company, and maybe it's your first time doing an H-1B, or maybe you've done them for decades and you're curious about updates or exploring what it's like to work with us. There may also be many people on this in attendance today who are aspiring H-1B holders themselves, and maybe it's your first time in the lottery, or maybe you've tried a few times and you want to understand what the landscape looks like in 2023. So we're primarily going to gear our presentation today towards companies, because you can't self-petition an H-1B. So if you want an H-1B, your company is going to have to sponsor you. So talking mainly to the companies here today, but everybody's welcome, and we'll also try to answer beneficiary questions as well throughout. And I see the questions coming in, so that's fabulous, and we will try to answer all of them. So feel free to pop them in there and we'll answer as we go, and also reserve time at the end. And this will be recorded, and you'll all get the recording in your email. So let's open it up. So why the H-1B? So Linda, what are some of the reasons that people might be considering this whole H-1B lottery process?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a great question. I know one of the key things that individuals seeking H-1B are looking for is essentially a pathway to work in the US longer term. And so the H-1B professional work visa does provide that. It may be someone who recently graduated, an F1 form student, and they want to be employed in the US. Sometimes companies want to hire employees that are working abroad or contractors abroad and bring them into the US. So it's an excellent opportunity there. Sometimes companies just want to sponsor, expand their talent pool, and they found qualified individuals working in other countries. So this is a great opportunity to bring people in. We also have clients that are in parallel non-immigrant statuses such as TN or E3 or H-1B1, which have more limitations on the amount of time they can be here, as well as the green card pathway can be more difficult in the statuses. So, and I guess the last individual type that we look at sometimes is an individual who's very accomplished, but maybe doesn't quite meet the standard needed for an O1A. So they decide to go the H-1B pathway.
Yeah, so you can be in the US already, the beneficiary can be outside of the US already, the company can be long established, the company can be very new. We've helped people in all of those situations. And just because the economy is on everybody's mind right now, just some preliminary thoughts I had were, so some people who have dabbled in the green card process have experienced PERM, which requires showing that there aren't enough Americans to do the job. And so you might be wondering, well, if a lot of people were just laid off, does that affect my chances? Can I still qualify for an H-1B? Linda, do layoffs have any effect for H-1B lottery recipients?
Yeah, no, they're completely protected. So, the regulations for the perm process, you do hit hiccups if you have layoffs in that particular occupation or something similar, but there's no impact for H-1Bs.
So that's good news. So a company that just laid people off, but now has somebody they need to sponsor for an H-1B, they can do that, right?
Exactly. And I mean, I
Okay.
think for smaller companies, they might be able to draw in a very talented worker pool,
Yeah.
individuals that are laid off. Maybe they've got foreign students working in OPT status for a big corporation, and now they're laid off, and then maybe they can come and sponsor them for an H-1B to work for their company.
Yeah, great. And a similar related topic is, and we'll talk about the lottery numbers in a little bit, but what are my odds going to be this year? And my hypothesis is this is probably one of the best years in the last 5 years to try to get somebody through the H-1B lottery, because there's probably going to be fewer people trying it. So you have a great chance, right?
Yeah, I feel the same way. The economy feels a little more unstable this year. I don't think we'll have as high numbers as last year for sure. So let's hope that our odds are going to be better. We can dig into
That's
that.
good news if you're on this webinar today. All right, so just putting this all into context, and if you've been on our webinars before, you've heard me do this overview, and it's mostly just to refresh if you're new to the process, but how does this all fit in? So a lot of people initially come to the US on a visa. The H-1B is a type of visa. There's other visas, visitor, fiance, student, there's all sorts of types of visas. People who get visas often later want to get green cards, but the green card is a multi-year process. So if you just want to be here like within a year, you're probably going to have to start with a visa first. If you don't get selected for an H-1B and you're abroad, that person could still pursue a green card from another country. There's no requirement that you have to be on a visa to get a green card. But just the typical path is that most people who might be hired on an H-1B probably are interested in obtaining a green card at some point, and that's a separate process down the road. And once somebody has a green card, that would enable them to apply for citizenship on their own if they meet the qualifications and want it. So that's just the overview. And then to zoom in on a particular subgroup of individuals, international students, we often find are placed in the lottery more frequently than other groups of people. And so this is the international student journey. People getting a bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD in the US. Some rarely get something called a J-1 exchange visitor visa, but by and large, there's about 1 million international students in the US on F1 at any given time. And so those individuals get these student visas. Sometimes they can work before they graduate on curricular practical training or pre-completion OPT. After they graduate, they are eligible for up to 3 years of work permission called regular OPT, which lasts 12 months. And then if they studied in a STEM field, they can also apply for a 24-month work permit extension, which has some additional requirements, and we help companies help their employees get STEM OPT as well. And then really the ask of a lot of beneficiaries, and the smart thing to do for a lot of recruiters and HR people and people ops and COOs and people tasked with growing teams, is to put those individuals in the annual H-1B lottery every single year until they get accepted. So if somebody's going to graduate Stanford with a master's degree in June of 2023, and you've extended them a job to be an engineer in July on their first year of regular OPT, we recommend that you put them in the lottery now before they graduate. And that way they could actually they could be in the lottery this year before they graduate. They could be in the lottery next year on OPT. They would have 2 more chances on STEM OPT. So hopefully with 4 chances, eventually that individual would get selected, or, you know, you can help them qualify for an O1 or something. And then ultimately, a lot of people who are on H-1B hope that their companies will sponsor them for an employment-based green card, which typically involves 3 steps: the PERM, the I-140 petition, the adjustment of status. It can take decades, sadly, if you're from India or China, but at least starting it is the key to getting H-1B extensions to be able to stay here and wait. So that's the overview. So Linda, let's talk about the H-1B basics. Oops. Okay, there we go. So walk us through, what is this magical H-1B that everybody's talking about that's so coveted with this weird lottery system?
Yeah, so an H-1B work visa is a job. Basically, the job has to be what's called a specialty occupation, and that's from the regulations. So a specialty occupation is a job that requires a specialized body of knowledge that one would obtain from a bachelor's program or, you know, equivalent experience, essentially. So, you know, we've got to prove that that's really going to be a specialized position, and then we have to show the individual has the qualifications to qualify for that position.
Okay, so probably like an executive assistant type role or chief of staff maybe wouldn't count, but scientist level 3 in the lab probably will count, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's the baseline requirement for the job always needs to be a bachelor's degree or equivalent. That's sort of the starting point for our analysis.
Okay. And then how much budget does a company need to set aside to pay the person's salary? Can they just offer them any salary?
So for the H-1B visa, when they convert over to H-1B status, we have to ensure that they're being paid what's called the prevailing wage rate. Okay. So the Department of Labor provides us with wage data through their OES wage library, which is occupation specific, with 4 wage levels, and also geographically specific. So we have to go do that research.
So we figure out what specific minimum salary the government requires for that county or city, for that job, for that level. So it's an individual thing, and it's not minimum wage, just to clarify for people. Right. Yeah, and we can talk about this more, but this is one of those things that people might have some questions about, given the economic times we're in. So we can touch more on it later, but high level, if the government salary data from last summer seems too high for what employers want to offer now, we have ways to look at alternatives, right?
Exactly. So they will accept certain private wage surveys.
Okay.
Have to meet certain Department of Labor requirements. So we know historically from our experience which surveys are successful in this process, so we can make those recommendations if needed. Yeah,
and also just, you know, the H-1B wage doesn't kick in until the person's on H-1B status. So if somebody's a student and they're still working on their OPT before their H-1B is activated, then this doesn't take effect until the H-1B status actually starts. Okay, so let's talk about why there's a lottery.
Yeah, so, you know, this is the buzzword we keep hearing around the office, is the lottery, the lottery. So we think about lottery tickets. I mean, it feels similar, I would say sometimes. Essentially, the government in Congress has issued 85,000 H-1B visa numbers that are available every fiscal year. So the federal fiscal year begins October 1. 6 months before the federal fiscal year begins, which is April 1, is really the date that we find out if individuals were picked or selected from that pool of 85,000. Within that number of 85,000, Congress has set aside 20,000 for those with U.S. master's degrees or higher. So those candidates essentially have a better shot of being selected under the lottery, because they'll be essentially vetted under, possibly selected under the U.S. master's cap, and then if they're not selected, they go back into the pool and they could be selected under the regular lottery. So, you know, demand is so high for H-1B numbers that, you know, before many years ago, we didn't need a lottery because there was, employers didn't
Yeah.
require more than 85,000 H-1Bs. So
2008, I think there were still H-1Bs available into June or July after the October start date and the prior year's lottery.
yeah, I
Agreed, it
remember
happened.
watching and waiting to see when the numbers would be used up because as you eat away at the fiscal year, you watch, those numbers drop off. So
Yeah.
things
But
have changed.
last year there were almost almost 500,000.
Yeah, I mean, a record number last year of registrants for
Yeah.
these 85,000 slots. So you can look at those odds, and we expect, I should say, that there'll be less registrants this year.
In the Trump years, there were about 200,000. So maybe it'll be something closer to that, where people had about like a 1 in 3 chance of being selected. So hopefully it'll be easier this year. Okay, so for companies that are looking at engaging in sponsorship for the first time, or just need a refresher on what the heck it is they're promising, what is a company committing to when they sponsor somebody? Of course, it's still like at-will employment. You can, fire or lay somebody off if you need to at any time. They can quit, but there's some additional requirements. So can you walk us through some of those?
Sure, yeah, and some of these requirements are Department of Labor regulations, and some are, Department of Homeland Security. The big one I think is the prevailing wage, right? And we talked about that a little bit, that the H-1B worker has to be paid the prevailing wage rate at a minimum. So that can be one of the first hurdles we have to cross. But as part of the labor condition application phase of the case, where we're pulling that prevailing wage and we're putting together the terms and conditions of employment, there's some compliance items an employer must be basically attest to, is that they don't have work conditions that adversely affect similar workers. There's no strike or lockout taking place. The LCA has to be basically publicly displayed for 10 business days, and we provide the company very specific guidance there. And the LCA goes in a neat little electronic folder or hard copy folder called a public access file. And essentially, documents maintained in that public access file must be available for inspection if Department of Labor does a site visit. And we walk companies through all of this. And the last piece is if, the H-1B employment ends, the company decides, maybe it didn't work out with that particular worker, they are obligated to offer a one-way, the cost of transportation home, which would really be like a one-way airline ticket.
Yeah.
It's an offer. It's not, it's something has to be put in writing on paper. The foreign national might say, actually, no, I have another opportunity in the US or whatever it may be.
With the people we have chatted with in the last several months since the tech layoffs started, I actually don't know of anybody who opted for this. Most people who were laid off use their 60-day grace period and then find another job and stay in the US and get sponsorship through another company. So
exactly, yeah.
All right, cool. So let's now get into the details of what is involved. So let's talk about, in the olden days, we did everything on paper. We mailed in hundreds of pages with checks just to find out if somebody was in the lottery. The government spent months mailing back all the paper that didn't get selected. So how does it work now? What is this is the fourth year?
I think it is the fourth year.
Fourth year of our electronic registration system.
Yeah, I mean, that old process was brutal. You'd be you'd be walking to the post office with these stacks of filings, and then
the whole office, every table covered with stacks of paper for weeks.
Many trees were destroyed. So, but now it's a much more humane, I would say, for everyone involved, and more cost effective for companies. It really gives them an opportunity to put people into the lottery without a huge upfront expense. So it's an electronic registration system, and it's all run through the USCIS portal. And accounts are created for the companies, and then there's an attorney account as well. So essentially, registrations run through the company account, which can be entered through the attorney account. It's very kind of interesting, the ins and outs of the two systems, but essentially we're putting in the names of registrants that the company wishes to support and paying a $10 fee for each registrant. And then there's an electronic random selection that happens by April 1. But that whole process of putting people into the lottery happens in a 2-week window in March, which is a little chaotic. I wish they gave us 30 days, but they don't.
Yeah.
So we've got the 2 weeks of chaos, and then you find out by April 1 if you were selected.
Right. Yeah. And this is really the starting point for many companies to engage with our law firm. And we'll chat a little bit more about that. But we support companies through this registration process. And not only does that involve the electronic data entry and linking to the law firm and paying the fee, but also just doing our due diligence to vet your candidates, vet the jobs, make sure that you have a viable case before, spending your time and money on this. So we are currently accepting new clients. We'll have more details about this at the end. We have a price increase that always happens on February 1st. So and we may simply run out of capacity to accept new clients. So if you want to sponsor people, please reach out to us today. You can message Alex or Dua or email us hello@alcorn.law, and we'll provide more details on that at the end as well. So let's talk about the timing. What is the purview for the next really 2-3 quarters? What does this whole seasonal visa process look like?
Yeah, so remember we talked about the federal fiscal year. So, anyone that's being entered into the lottery right now, if they're selected and approved, the H-1B won't be effective until October 1, when the new federal fiscal year 2024 begins. But sort of going back to the beginning of this process, it all starts with this government portal, right? So a lot of companies may have done registrations last year so they could reactivate their portal. If they didn't, they'll need to create a new portal on the USCIS site, and that happens. March 1 is around the time it seems to happen each year. And then we have that 2-week period where we can actually submit the registrations that have been entered into the portal in mid-March.
Mm-hmm. And since this is the 4th year, and now we've had this e-registration system under 2 different presidential administrations, and they're still working out the kinks, there's been variations every year, the number of days we have, the start date, the end date. So that's another reason that, we support our clients is just, oh, now it's this one this year. So now we have to project manage to get everything done by this date. So we'll, we monitor all of that and track it. And one of the weird things last year, which just means that they're refining their statistics, in prior years, we had multiple lotteries. Candidates were finding out, I didn't get selected in March, but now it's July or August or October, and I've been selected. And we didn't have that happen in calendar year 2022, right?
Yeah, that was a little disappointing, I think, for a lot of individuals who are waiting. They call it the wait list because it's really like you're waiting in the wings to see if they hold enough people to satisfy the 85,000 numbers for lottery candidates. So no wait list last year. The prior year, I think we saw 2 or 3 rounds. So it's
people selected in November.
Yeah, that was so strange.
Yeah. So we'll see. It's an adventure. We'll figure it out. So as we're encouraging people to contact us immediately if they would like to get started, how can people also prepare if you're a company or if you're a beneficiary? What are some good documents to have on hand?
Yeah, for the individuals, if you're in the US, you want to make sure you have a full copy of all your immigration documents. So, for example, if you're an F1 student, you'll have the Form I-20, maybe some EAD cards. You want to make sure you have all those documents just to make sure you can demonstrate that you've maintained your status. Any other visa categories you've held the US, you want to make sure you have all those approvals. Educational documents are very important because, again, that threshold is a bachelor's degree or equivalent. So try to get your hands on your diploma, ask for your transcript now, update your CV, because ultimately we're going to be looking at that and, you know, using that data to help us do our assessment. And if you have a foreign degree, then it might be the right time to get that evaluated to determine what the US equivalent of that degree is.
Or if you didn't complete college, the H-1B might still be within reach if you have enough work experience. So we can help with that. Great. And how do company documents, I mean, we have this list here, but if you're already Series C, I don't think we need to show your pitch deck. So how do these materials kind of change for super early stage companies and then more established companies?
Yeah, I mean, I say for the, you know, newer companies, the startups, we want to make sure that we can show that the company is incorporated. You know, they were issued an FEIN number from IRS. They have the pitch deck, and they basically have enough funding or resources to pay the H-1B prevailing wage. So those are some of the key things that we look at.
Okay. Wonderful. Yeah, and we don't write your job descriptions for you. We will give you feedback, but that is your responsibility in good faith to come up with a real job that you really need. We will, of course, help you tailor it and refine it, but you need to know what job you're hiring somebody for.
Exactly. Department of Labor has some resources too we can share. I mean, these are outdated. We're going 10, 20 years back for these occupations, but they can be a good starting point for some job descriptions, and we do share those with our clients.
Okay, and then we covered this. Let's talk a little bit about the filing fees. So it's $10 for the government to put somebody in the lottery, and I'll just share right here. Our fee to put somebody in the lottery is $1,000. We include the $10 in it. That's if you hire us now. If you wait till February, if we still have capacity to accept more clients, our fee will increase to $2,000, and then, you know, we credit that ultimately to the H-1B fee later on for whoever is accepted. But let's talk about the government filing fees for people who are accepted. What should people budget? When is that going to have to be paid? And what are the updates about filing fee increases?
Yeah, so, you know, as of right now, we have some current fees, but they may increase in the next 3 to 6 months. So by the time these petitions are filed, we might be looking at some increased USCIS filing fees. Some may go up as much as 40%. You know, there's no talk about increasing the premium processing, which is that $2,500 fee that you pay for fast track processing. And it's not always available during cap season. So that's one of those things that we have to wait and see on as well. But yeah, the companies do want to budget between $1,700 and $2,400 just for these government filing fees. Again, it could be higher if these fees are increased. There's a potential regulation that's out in the comment period now, so we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, and that doesn't always go through, so maybe it won't happen. I think the last time it happened, it got held up. And then as you grow, if you become what they call H-1B dependent, or you have a lot of people under H or L visas, then there's reasons that you might be charged additional fees. So that gives you a ballpark. And I would say that most of our clients, depending on how urgently they want it, but most H-1Bs end up all in for somebody who's selected with all the filing fees, usually between $6,000 and $10,000, depending on how fast you need it to go. And but that just gives you a rough budget. And a lot of people say, well, that's cheaper than a recruiter. So there you go. Okay, so yeah, and you mentioned this a little bit, premium processing. I think we had it last year. I think they're getting more efficient with the electronic lottery. In the past, they would just suspend premium processing for H-1Bs in spring because they got overwhelmed, but hopefully it's still on. And the fee for premium processing isn't set to increase, but the duration calculation might be, right? So how would that work if that change goes through?
Right. So the proposed change to that is, you know, currently it's 15 calendar days. If you're paying the premium processing fee, that's how quickly they'll adjudicate the case. But they're proposing changing that to 15 business days. So now we're looking at 3 weeks versus 2 weeks.
3 weeks. Okay. So 15 plus some weekends, depending on when you file it. Okay. Thank you. Okay, now let's go into some of the specific nuances about students and travel and COVID and remote. We can talk about remote workers as well. I see that question. So let's go through these and we'll pick up the pace a little bit. So if somebody is going to graduate with their bachelor's degree from a semester school on May 15th, let's say in computer science, can you put them in the lottery, and when do you file their petition? If they
Yeah, so this is I think one of the big perks of the lottery versus the old paper filing system, you know. So if someone isn't qualified and doesn't have that degree requirement met on the day of registration sometime in March, that's okay as long as they earn the degree before the H-1B petition is filed with USCIS if they're selected. I think you're muted, Sophie.
Thank you. And we have that 90-day window, so we could easily file on May 25th. And likewise, if there's a Stanford person getting their master's and we put them in the master's cap to give them a higher chance, Stanford graduation is usually around solstice, just June 21st, but we still have a week after that to show that they complied with the master's degree requirement and get that filed. So this is also where working closely with us from the beginning helps us set the right plan for each beneficiary. And then let's think about on the other side of the student experience. Let's say somebody is in their final year of OPT. So let's say either they studied law and they only get 1 year of OPT and it's going to expire in July, or they studied engineering and it's the end of their STEM OPT and that's going to expire in July. Do they get, and they get selected in the lottery, can they work from July until October 1st?
Yeah, so there's this great provision, cap gap, that essentially says if someone in that situation, F1 OPT student, has expiring status and it expires before October, well, actually, if it expires before the October 1 start date of the H-1B, they'll basically bridge the gap in their employment and their OPT automatically gets extended from, let's say, July until September 30th, and then they can convert over to H-1B status on October 1.
Yeah. I recall a couple of years ago, we had somebody who graduated from a semester school in May and got their OPT for the very earliest start date. So the end of their final year of OPT was on May 20th. So we had in that case to also make sure we filed their H-1B after the lottery by that work permit end date to give them the benefit of cap gap. And if you're using this, do not travel internationally. We'll just make it simple. Just don't.
Yeah.
Okay, and speaking of travel, let's talk about there's 2 different ways to file this thing, to activate it. So what is a change of status?
Yeah, so like in the immigration world, whenever we file a change of status for any case type, if you travel outside the US while it's pending, you can abandon your request to change status. So that's something to be mindful of. Anyone that's, applying under the lottery and they get selected, we've got that 90-day filing window. So what I would suggest is use that window to strategize. If you do have travel plans, go ahead, go home. If you have a visa stamp, go ahead, go home, come back, and then we can file your H-1B petition once you've returned and you're come back in an F1 status.
Yeah. Okay, great. And this is just really the best option if you're in the US. Travel's still hard post-COVID, getting visa appointments. So this is like if you have the luxury to already be in the US and to not need to travel after June 30th, this is really the safest and best option for a lot of people. There is, however, consular processing. So what is that?
Yeah, so when we say consular process, it means that you have to take some steps to activate your H-1B status. So you may get an approval notice, but your status isn't changed or extended in the US. So you'll have to go to a US embassy or consulate, apply for an H-1B visa stamp, and then you can re-enter the US around October 1 or, right around that, up to 10 days before to essentially activate your H-1B status.
Yeah, I haven't been recommending this since COVID, but I have seen situations where people born in India or China who have very long wait times for green cards who get selected, let's say in regular OPT and still have STEM OPT ahead of them, and the company's not ready to start the green card process for them. They might, and they don't have travel plans, they might just choose consular processing and get that approval, but actually not leave to activate their H-1B and use up their 3 years of OPT. And then when the company's ready, they could either travel and get the visa and come back in, or I've even seen like a change of status later. So it's kind of weird. And this is also, you know, there's risks involved with all of this. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, some people do like to get that approval, put it in their pocket. I mean, I guess what I worry about if you're waiting to activate the case is, let's say if you're laid off from your job and you haven't activated your H-1B, then you're in a tough position, right? Because you might not be able to get an H-1B transfer. So waiting does have its risks. And I do understand for some individuals, they're trying to hold that time knowing that the green card process is going to take a while. So something, if you're thinking about it, you really need to talk to your attorney about it and weigh those risks.
Yeah. And it can be good to just strike while the iron's hot and you know, get it. Okay, right. And so just, you know, talk to your lawyer, talk to Linda and our wonderful team if you're planning any travel before you commit to the travel plans. Linda already gave some great tips. So, you know, if you don't need to go visit grandma and you're a student or something, do it on your F1 before we have to file. If somebody's wedding is in August, it's going to be a trickier conversation. So it depends on where you're from and how long the visa wait times are. And then some updates. There are certain jobs that are harder to get H-1Bs approved for just based on litigation history, political administrations, various changes over time. You know, historically, computer programmers was a very challenging occupation for many years. So we would have to put people in the more expensive software engineer category. But this is one of the things where having an expert like Linda is amazing, because our team will help you figure out, oh, hey, look, are there actually job duties in this area? Maybe we could categorize this position a little bit differently. So we will guide you through all of that. Anything that are just like a no-go, Linda, or should we just, if somebody wants to sponsor, it's at least worth having a conversation, right?
Yeah, and I have to say I've done H-1Bs in pretty much all of these categories.
Right.
You know, it's a little more painful, and we're going to ask you for documentation, and we're going to give us your transcript and explain how your courses relate. So we do the extra legwork. We can often win on these tricky occupations. We do try to steer companies away when we think there's an easier fit that's going to be more successful, but sometimes it's just a challenge.
I see a couple of questions about job industries. And so somebody asks, if you're working in marketing, but you have a music degree, is there any way to work around that? And, you know, we can figure out job titles like market research analysts and how to navigate that. And we can get that degree equivalence evaluation and show that your, you know, 2 years of music experience plus your 6 years, or, you know, your 2 years of general ed plus your 6 years of work experience maybe is equivalent to a bachelor's of business administration, or maybe you're doing marketing in the music field and there's a way to tie it in. So I think it's definitely worth asking and looking into that more, right?
Yeah, functional equivalency is a great tool for individuals that don't have degrees that align, but you've got to have some work experience. So, you know, as we said before, work on that resume, make sure it's very specific, hours, dates, and we can do that assessment for you.
Somebody else had a question about a fashion merchandising bachelor's degree and the probability of getting sponsored or selected. I mean, let's assume that you find a job at a company where they require a fashion merchandising bachelor's to do the role. I think that would be a very viable H-1B.
Yeah,
possible, right?
Exactly. And like, let's say if the job involves more of like packaging the product. So maybe you're working on the labels for the clothing, or the
Yeah.
packaging, and we could look at industrial designer. So, you know, we can be creative on our side too.
Oh, yeah, we just did that really crazy TN in fashion. So
Yes,
great.
we
Yeah.
did. Yes.
Okay. And here's another one. Somebody has a question about if somebody with a computer science degree could potentially get a digital marketing occupation. And I think that there could be an argument there as well. And it also comes down to like what the company typically requires for candidates for that role. So.
Yeah, and I look at like business intelligence analysts because that kind of draws in both of those occupations. So we can do some creative work to see where we can make that align. And then we also have that functional equivalency that we spoke about. So even if the degree's not a match, we can see if we can get evaluation based on the experience and education together. So
wonderful. Okay. Oh, and then yeah, so keeping an eye on time and questions, we did have a question specifically about remote workers, and this is where you know, that really comes in. So let's talk about working from home or multiple work sites. The specific question we got is, for remote workers, is there a way in the application to indicate the work location can be remote, or once the H-1B is approved, the workers need to move to where the company is located? So please tell us about that, Linda.
So I'll take the second half of that. So, you know, as Sophie mentioned earlier, the H-1B, the start date would be October 1. So all the requirements that the company is attesting to in the petition need to be met as of October 1. So that means they have to be working at that work site, being paid the prevailing wage in that H-1B role. As far as working from home, I mean, since COVID, we've seen the government sort of soften on this issue, much more flexible. A lot of the cases that we're filing, the individuals are working from home, even 100%. We have to be careful if it's an entry-level position, because those kinds of positions normally require supervision. So we've got to be able to show how they're still supervised, even though they're working 100% remote. So it requires
and if you have a lab, you know, you can require somebody to go there 2 days a week and they can work from home the rest of the time. And also this location requirement doesn't kick in until the H-1B status is activated, usually October 1st. And if you're going to let people work from home, then if they move, you're responsible for changing their H-1B. So keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, exactly. But if the move is within the same commuting area, we can preserve that H-1B, but keep us posted on job, you know, site changes, because that's really important.
Okay. Let's talk about COVID. What are these new vaccine requirements? Yeah,
so CDC came out with some new requirements for non-immigrants coming to the US. They have to show proof of their vaccination as of April 10th. Excuse me, it runs through April 10th. So this is a new rollout in January for this requirement. So we're seeing these testing requirements. So foreign nationals really have to be aware of that before they're traveling, make sure they have their records. They'll accept an electronic or hard copy proof of vaccination. There are some exemptions, but those are pretty narrow. So that's something you want to speak to your attorney about.
Okay, great. And you still have to have that negative COVID test before entering, right?
Actually, Sophie, I'm not certain about that.
Oh, okay. No, I think so. I think we have to have both.
Okay,
We've got the vaccination and the test. So make sure you do both.
This is so fluid, so it could change tomorrow, right? So what we're you today, go to cdc.gov and see what it says, because I can tell you it's constantly changing.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to answer the rest of the questions in just a minute here. We have a lot. But just to give you some more information about working with us, we would love to support you. And as you know, a company starts to go through this process, your expenditures are cash, time, and energy. You can't just like pay and magically, you don't have to do anything. We still need your cooperation, communication, data, information, but we try to streamline that and make that process as easy for you as possible. There may be some additional expenses. We already talked about the budget for legal and filing fees. Those education evaluations can be a couple $100. Maybe there's a fee for transcripts. So, you know, maybe stuff needs to get translated. There's little things here and there. But just keep that in mind. And we also have a really great success rate of immediate approvals without any requests for evidence. That's one of the things that I'm so proud of our amazing team for. And I think it's because on the front end, we really do a lot of vetting and communication to make sure that everything is really approvable and we're helping our clients put their best foot forward. So those are just general factors to keep in mind as you're embarking on this process. And if you would like to work with Alcorn, we do currently still have availability, but it is first come, first serve. We're already handling a lot of H-1Bs for our existing clients who we engaged with in, even December or November to start their H-1Bs for this year. But what we handle is, figuring out, can your beneficiary qualify? What's the prevailing wage? Do they have the right skills? Is this the right job description? We'll guide you through everything necessary for this whole electronic process within the dates. We'll keep you apprised of the outcome. And then, we're on hand to immediately push go and start the full H-1B petition process. And of course, we'll continue to monitor for government updates, changes in premium processing, additional lotteries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It is first come, first serve. We do have limited capacity. We are currently accepting clients for those of you listening to the recording, today is January 19th. So we do really encourage you to contact us like literally today if you want help, because our calendars are very impacted. And we want to make sure that we have enough time, space, brain power, energy to support all of our clients. And we are increasing the price by $1,000 on February 1st. And, just depending on how many people want to hire us, I cannot even guarantee that we still will have capacity in February, much less March. So if this is on the radar for you, it's really critical to act as quickly as possible. Sometimes people wake up in March and they're like, oh, there's that lottery next week. Will you help us? And we have to turn a lot of people away. So we would love to support you and help us help you by starting now, please. So here's our contact information for you. You can email us at hello@alcorn.law. You can also call us 855-546-0015. We also have a new texting feature that's going to be going live on our website very soon. So we'll have that additional functionality, which is very, very cool. And we'll be sending our options chart along with this recording to everybody who registered for today's webinar. Okay, we have a few minutes, so let's rapid fire as many questions as possible. Okay. If I don't get picked for the H-1B lottery this year, could I go on the J-1 graduate visa that my country offers instead and then apply to the H-1B next year? Or could that cause issue for the H-1B next year as the J-1 graduate is non-immigrant intent? It's not the non-immigrant intent, but it's that 2-year 212E foreign residence requirement that you have to be so careful about. If you accept government funding, you might have to return to your home country for 2 years. And also, for companies who want to bypass the lottery and do J-1 training programs or research programs to bring people here, you can certainly do that, but then you really shouldn't sponsor people in the H-1B lottery because your company can get slapped by Department of State and you might not have any J-1 providers still wanting to work with you. So a word of caution there. Okay, Linda, if I get an H-1B or if I apply for an H-1B or a green card, can I still travel to the US on a tourist visa?
This is a tricky one. It just depends on where you are. Like if you're approved for an H-1B, it's going to be very difficult to come into the US as a tourist because, what is your intent at the time you're coming in or to apply for a tourist visa? Yeah. So I would say act very cautiously in that situation.
I think there's people who put themselves in the diversity green card lottery. And that's like a lower level. You can still travel as a tourist. Just make sure that you clarify, here's my return ticket. Here's my itinerary. I'm not working here. I don't have a US citizen girlfriend. I'm going back because of my business, and you can probably talk your way through it. Okay. Travel question for OPT, Linda. I'm working under OPT. If I'm selected and my OPT ends in May, can I travel abroad between June and October?
So if we're talking about cap gap, meaning the very end of your OPT and it can't be extended, you'd need to stay in the US through October 1
Yeah.
because the
Yeah.
OPT would be
Yeah.
extended from May until September 30th. That's only if you remain in the US.
Yeah. And I think it's different, you know, depending on what sort of visa you have and if it's valid and if it's multiple entries. So this is something to talk to your employer's immigration lawyer while you go through the lottery process about. Somebody else asked, new STEM grad, don't have a job. Is it too late? I don't think it's too late. I think that there's a lot of funded startups hiring, looking for the best talent. They conserve their cash knowing the recession was coming, and they're actually really eager to sponsor people. So definitely look for jobs. It's not too late. And you can also look at alternatives. You know, nonprofits can hire. Sometimes they don't even have to go through the lottery. It can be a part-time job. It doesn't have to be a full-time job. People get offers at consulting companies. So there's a lot of creative ways to look at that. And then in terms of which companies are currently sponsoring, I mean, there's a lot of tech job boards. Y Combinator has like a whole thing on their website. And there's also databases with Freedom of Information Act requests, like I think it's like myvisanow.com has historical data on all the companies that have sponsored H-1Bs and PERMs in the past. So there are different ways to figure that out. Linda, how soon can you apply for a green card once you get an H-1B visa in the lottery?
You can apply, you can start the process whenever. So the green card is really a future job. So we even have individuals start the process while they're outside the US. We just have to make sure that we can get them into the US in a category that, you know, permits immigrant intent. So that's the beauty of the H-1B. So that can be started right away.
Okay. I think that's all the time we have. Thank you so much. I know there are a few more questions. You can always email us, hello@alcorn.law. We do not have an employer matchmaking service yet, so we're not able to help people find jobs, but we would love to support you. We would love to help if you're, you know, an individual, we'd love to help any company that wants to offer you a job. And if you're a company, please contact us today. So thank you so much, Linda, for doing this webinar with me.
Thank you, Sophie. This was fun.
And thank you, Alex and Dua, for your help. We wish everybody a fabulous rest of your day. And thank you so much for listening.